So good morning, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Smart Grid Days. This is a very important occasion every year. We have these two concepts, digitalization and smart grids also for gas, and that is becoming increasingly important and tangible, especially when one has to deal with multi-gas systems. So I would like to leave the floor to Giorgio for his introductory remarks. We have a wonderful weather, as you can see here in 𝐤𝐸𝐽𝐼, but jokes apart, except for that apart, that we have many participants in the room, and this is particularly important. It's important to address these topics, especially to understand the cultural aspects underlying the Smart Grid Days. And we are here to understand, together with our experts, to understand a little bit more about the ecological and digital transition, as well as the cultural transition, and where we stand. So, Giorgio, you have the floor. So good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for your participation. This is the 11th edition of the Smart Grid Days organized by Automat. So this has become a well-established reference point. We probably chose the worst week we could when it comes to the weather. However, we have a say in Italian. We say that when a bride gets married and there's the rain outside, well, she's going to be a lucky bride. So we hope that this applies to us as well, that we're going to be lucky as well. So the world of energy is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the digitalization of networks. That's an increasingly important aspect, and we're going to listen to some interesting contributions in this respect. As I've often said, in Europe, and especially in Italy, I believe that we are a reference beacon when it comes to technologies for gas networks. We have the chance, we are lucky enough that we can operate in many countries in the world, and even in countries that are supposedly avant-garde in this respect. Well, in fact, they look at Italy, they look at our country as a reference country when it comes to the technologies in this sector. Last but not least, the United States. The United States is a country characterized by a lot of technologies in many fields, but not in this one. And this is a reason to be proud for us, because they look at us. So in this very moment, it is very important to have an exchange of views in order to share future trends and how we can continue being a world reference model in the field of gas technologies. We are here, and we are addressing also multi-utilities, because they also aim at becoming very efficient. The energy system has to support the industrial development of the country. This is something that should not be forgotten. And the topic of energy has to be, in this respect, reviewed, because it should be seen as a field that should support the industrial world, an industrial sector that needs to be re-energized and revitalized again. So I think that we should address also this relationship between ecological transition and industrial development. This is another aspect that you, as being an entrepreneur, in your capacity as an entrepreneur, we should address. Well, yes, energy is a primary reference point for manufacturing companies. In Italy, our economy is largely relies on manufacturing companies. So this is indeed a very important aspect. We've made specific choices in the past when it comes to the energy sector. So gas continues to be fundamental. We're doing a lot when it comes to the application of gas. This is something that is increasing. We are implementing far-reaching technological advances, for example, in the field of biogas. There's lots of initiatives there, and there's an open debate in that respect. Clearly, if a country wishes to make progress from an industrial point of view, and if you are a country like Italy, which is a processing country, well, here, one of the most important obstacles for the development of a country like us lies in the field of energy. So we need to provide tangible answers in this respect. In the roundtable, we're going to talk about smart grids, and we also have to talk about human grids, so human networks bringing together different skills and different competences. So another topic that we will address is precisely this. We have increasingly contaminated ourselves, also professionally and also in terms of skills, and that's yet another important point that in ways characterizes this event. I mean, we are laying emphasis also on human relations. Yes, that's true. Networking inevitably takes place through sharing know-how, because energy efficiency can be achieved only if networks are correctly managed. You need to create new technologies, for example, biogas, but you also need to optimize the management and control of the networks. And this applies to gas networks, but to any networks. There are many weaknesses also, for example, when it comes to water networks. Water is a resource which is sometimes considered of a secondary importance, of a minor importance, but it is not at all the case. When it comes to gas, this has a twofold importance. On the one hand, we need to optimize the use of the raw material itself, and at the same time, we also have to consider the aspect of environmental contamination if the network is not properly managed. So digitalizing networks and efficiently controlling networks are two fundamental aspects. When it comes to human networks, we asked Marco Catalini to join us here for some introductory remarks on behalf of his association, as a representatives of those who are here who also work on many other fields. We do many different things. I would like to thank Automa, as usual, for the invitation. Automa is a partner of AMPA, the Association for the Protection of Materials and their Performance. I am the president of this association, of the Italian chapter of this association, and I'd like to just spend some words to greet you on at the beginning of this event that has become a reference event, not only for digitalization and for the monitoring of networks, but also for corrosion protection. Tomorrow we're going to devote our day to protection. So once again, congratulations for the figures you've achieved, and congratulations also for bringing bad weather so that everybody can stay here and follow the contribution. So we can now start the works. I'd like to leave the floor to Marcello Capra, Ministry for the Environment. I'd like to leave you in the good hands of experts. They will certainly help us. They will help us all catch our attention and follow these very interesting topics. Marcello always opens our days, our smart grid days, and that is a very interesting contribution that can help us understand the various topics that institutions focus on in this historical moment. Thank you very much, Marcello. Thank you very much, Emanuele, and good morning, everyone. Thanks to Automa and to Mr. Giorgetti for this well-established traditional event that becomes bigger and bigger every year. It's a great pleasure to be part of this community. In short, I will try and provide you with some updates on the evolution of the energy policy, at least of the energy policy of the Italian Ministry for the Environment and Energy Safety, and to update you compared to what happened last year. And then I will try and address the topic of smart grids in view of these new developments, legislative new developments. So let us start from the National Energy and Climate Plan, the PNIEC. We had to come to a final draft of the plan. This is what we told each other last year, and this was done by the Italian government. Italy was among the very first group of countries. The PNIEC is the plan that provides the guidelines and the policies of member states, of EU member states, from now up to 2030. But it also looks further ahead. It looks to 2040 and 2050. The plan has 5 dimensions. The main feature of the plan lies in the fact that it has a technologically neutral approach. This means that there are no univocal solutions. This is a plan that accommodates various technologies. However, its main priorities are always energy safety and the decarbonization of the system. Here you see the main indicators, the main scenario indicators. Some of them are binding. For example, emission reduction, the reduction of emissions. There's 2 types of reductions. There's one emission reduction linked to the sectors that are covered by the emission trading system. For example, the thermoelectrical sector, so the the iron and steel sector, so to say. Then the effort-sharing sectors, where you have sectors that are not covered by the emission trading system, so residential sector, small SMEs, and mobility. As you can see here, here we have a gap between the objectives that were given to us by the Green Deal, the so-called Fit for 55 package, and what we will actually achieve by 2030. Compared to the previous draft of the plan, an improvement was registered. However, we wanted to be realistic, and instead of providing a figure that corresponds to the target, we preferred to indicate a very realistic indication. We wanted to indicate the actual estimated reduction of the emissions. When it comes to renewable sources of energies, we committed ourselves to achieve slightly more than 39%. So this includes not only electrical energy, we have, for example, energy-intensive sectors. When it comes to the electrical sector, here we have this very challenging objective, 63%. So there is a gap in emissions. This is the emission gap that we did not manage to bridge in this draft of the plan. Probably in the next 5 to 6 years, we might be in a position to reach the target. So here you see an emission gap, especially in effort-sharing sectors. So, for example, in transports, mobility, SMEs, in the residential sector, and similar sectors. This emission data is linked to consumption reduction. So if we are not capable of reducing consumption, of course, the bridge will be bigger. So when it comes to the electrical sector, a very challenging target lies ahead. So 39.4% refers to energy consumption. So we have energy consumption, and if you reduce consumption, of course, it is easier to reach the target. But we basically start more or less from this situation. So our target as of 2020 was easily reached. But now you see what kind of pathway lies ahead, and it is a very complex one. Here you see contributions, expected contributions in 2030 of the various sources of renewable energy, over 130 gigawatts of energy from renewable sources, 80 gigawatts of that only from solar systems. So as you can see, these indicators, these numbers are very challenging, and they go hand in hand with the ability of building installations. They go hand in hand with the administrative procedures, and this can be quite challenging, especially for wind farms. As regards gas, gas will continue to play a crucial role in the plan for the stability of the energy system. This goes without saying. The motivations are obvious for everybody. We expect an increasing integration also with the so-called renewable gases. And I hope that we will address this topic. So biomethane, synthetic methane, hydrogen, and so on. In 2023, we had a reduction in gas demand. We registered a reduction in gas demand for a number of reasons, which was of about 10%, especially in the thermoelectrical sector and in the residential sector. Gas demand was covered only by 50% by domestic production, and domestic production was registered as a lower domestic production compared to the year before. However, the plan is indicating that the gas system will probably continue being important in the stability of the system. Here you see the percentages that we assumed. This is a reduction on the primary energy mix. So a reduction of about 2 percentage points. There is a strong growth of renewable energy sources and also of electric energy. Now, let's address the topic of this two-day conference, smart grids. Smart grids, for us, are mainly electric smart grids. Over the last few years, the development of this technology was due by the growing share of renewable sources of energy, which changed the paradigm in the electrical system. Here you see a table, the table of expected investments, of the investments that are needed to reach the targets that you saw. So we need an investment volume that is higher than 800 billions. This can be done with ongoing current policies without specific interventions, and this is the delta. Most of this sum will refer to the transports field, so e-cars, electric cars, but also the electrical sector will require a considerable, significant amount of investments as storage systems. These are investments that cannot be supported by the public sector alone. Private investments are called upon to play a significant role. They appear among the priority sectors for the plan. In the plan, you will find these 8 priority technologies. So, for example, digitalization and network technologies are definitely a priority. They are indicated in the plan, and they will require investments also in terms of research and development. Smart grids, especially in the electrical sector, have represented a real need. They were necessary to better monitor transition. the network is no longer unidirectional, so it does no longer go from the big power plants to consumers. But over the years, we've witnessed a considerable development of renewable energy plants. The growth in the digitalization of the system goes hand in hand with an increase in the risks that may affect the research. That is why we are increasing research in cybersecurity, and I think that even for the gas sector, this will be a priority. So investing in cybersecurity will be paramount for the gas sector as well. So we should, in a way, deal with the innovation of infrastructures in the long term, but this will also require investments in the safety, in the simulation, and in the experimental activity of the network. This is something that we are witnessing. We are also trying to invest resources in research and development together with our main research institutions. Now, let us now talk about resources. Here you see a table in various colors and with areas covering in areas of various dimensions depending on their importance. You have the renewable sources of energy, hydrogen network, and sustainable mobility, which is the biggest one, 23.78 billion euros. That's the biggest part. Regional public transportation, that's the biggest one foreseen by the National Resilience and Recovery Plan. And that is followed by the strengthening of smart grids. Most of them are electric ones. Then we've also activated a measure. So tenders have already been launched for this measure. This measure is the reinforcement of smart grids, the strengthening of smart grids in order to increase grid capacity, the hosting capacity, so the volume that can be, in a way, covered by renewable sources. This is what smart grids are needed if we think of increased consumption. The PNIEC foresees a very important number of registered cars by the year 2030. And besides, we should also consider other needs, for example, the cooling and heating needs. So a first share of the amount of the endowment was set aside. The aim was to increase the capacity of renewable sources by 4 gigawatts, and increase capacity and the power at the disposal of at least 1,500,000 users. So we increased resources also thanks to the Repower EU. That's the additional endowment that was launched by the European Commission after the crisis between Russia and the Ukraine, and this has brought about additional resources in terms of power and in terms of involved number of users. So smart grids is a topic, is a very important one in terms of number of operators working in the field, which are not only the traditional ones. We not only have to deal with Enel, but the most important utilities, Italian utility firms. However, the topic of smart grids is still subject to research and innovation. We believe that much research and innovation has to be carried out in this field. We've recently signed an agreement during the COP21 summit in Paris. This agreement foresees that investments in research and development will be doubled by 5 years. And these have to be investments in R&D in low-carbon technologies. Recently, the minister has signed a decree setting aside over 500 million euros to promote in the period between 2024 to 2026 technologies that have to be implemented in priority topics, including network technologies, energy storage, and renewable energy sources, as well as hydrogen. These projects will have to be pilot projects, demonstration projects. In other words, this doesn't mean that research projects in the labs or in universities or in research centers will be stopped because of this. In the future, in the next few years, we need demonstration projects, industrial scale projects, and so that we can then move from the demonstration of the technologies to the rapid implementation. That's the TRL parameter. So the technology readiness level has to be average or medium. So in short, we will be calls for tenders for this. They are targeting companies, so I suggest that you keep an eye on the website of the ministry, because our goal is that companies commit themselves in these activities and in these projects, in these demonstration projects. There are mission smart grid funds. We have already invested the first share of that. And plus, there is this Mission Smart Grid project has recently been launched in Portici by Enea for the first time. This is carrying out a mixed experimentation, mixed meaning between an experimentation on electrical smart grids and gas smart grids. The aim is to carry out, in a way, achieve an integration between the various systems and assess their potential. This is the scheme of this Mission Smart Grid. So you have an electric grid and you have a thermal grid as well with a cogenerator. This is a pilot plant, of course, that is currently being looked after in Portici at the Enea plant in Portici, but we are already reasonably satisfied. We are dealing with projects developed by research centers, so the results will be available soon for everybody. Then, smart grids are among the 10 key actions of the Strategic Energy Technology Plan, the SET plan, that is the community container of innovative technologies. This plan defined 10 key actions, and these include smart systems and smart energy systems, which can be variously interpreted in terms of smart cities and smart communities, energy consumers, and so on. So we are basically working also here, also on the community field. The SET plan has to define also the financial needs and the volumes in the investment volumes in research and developments that we expect to carry out for the next few years. And as you can see, the energy system, including smart grids, will require the largest amount of investments, nearly 5 billion euros, followed by other priority technologies. You've probably noted that the European Commission has recently adopted a regulation, so a legislative piece of legislation that has immediately come into force. That's the Net Zero Industry Act, defining a series of priority technologies that are needed to reach a very challenging objective, which is that of keeping the technology manufactured in green technologies for at least 40%, at least in Europe. So this is an industrial, this has an industrial objective, and it is based on innovative technologies, including the grid technologies. So as you can see, there is a constant integration of these topics. This Net Zero Industry Act is a very important piece of legislation. It is expected to change all of our perspectives. And here you see the technologies that it foresees. Other 3 technologies were added, so in total there's 10 of them. All these initiatives clearly need a public-private partnership. All of our tenders take this possibility of cooperation between the private and the private sector into account. So these are industrial projects which, however, require the collaboration of research centers and universities. So you have the research center that produces knowledge and know-how. This knowledge is put at the disposal of companies and they implement them. And then some research is then finalized. Other research isn't, but that's of course part of the game. Let me close by focusing on hydrogen. I think that the topic of hydrogen is of interest for many of you. I've extensively dealt with this topic for many years. As you probably know, the National Resilience and Recovery Plan set aside over 3.6 billion euros for hydrogen. This sum concerns the whole supply chain, so it concerns, for example, mobility, the fueling stations for car transportation, then the use of hydrogen in hard-to-abate sectors, so the steel sector, the water sector, the paper sector, and so on. And then the development of the entire supply chain with the creation of 2 gigafactories that are currently being looked after and managed by Ansaldo and SNAM, Ansaldo Energia and SNAM. And then a series of reforms requested, provided by the plan. So the National Resilience and Recovery Plan, of course, provides us with lots of money, but of course it also needs, it forces us to implement good results. So the most important, probably most expected measure concerns the hydrogen valleys on abandoned industrial areas. About 100 projects were submitted. 57 were admitted to financing, were considered eligible for financing. Some were withdrawn, others were reviewed. Probably this figure will not be the final one, but more or less we have about 57 projects eligible for financing. The political decision to entrust this project to the regions has proven positive, has proven the good one. We have quite an even distribution of the projects throughout Italy, and therefore we're quite satisfied. The Repower EU device provided us with additional 90 million, so we were able to admit other projects. These measures go hand in hand with the measures that the Ministry for Transportation issued for railway and highway fueling stations. So mainly they covered the most important backbones, street backbones in the north and also in the south, the railway systems in Sicily, in Sardinia, Calabria, in the Apulia region. So this means that the development of infrastructures is expected to be developed. And this, of course, has to go hand in hand with the hydrogen valleys. The problem of hydrogen today lies in its cost. There has, therefore, to be a high demand, and this high demand will have to bring costs down. With the National Resilience and Recovery Plan, we need to build infrastructures, but ultimately, it will be the task of the market to have supply and demand meet. I was talking about reforms. We've done quite a lot over the last few years. I'm not going to address the details. I'd just like to mention this decree that led to the reduction to 2% of the hydrogen. Actually, Engineer Fiameni knows very well what this meant. This appears to be very, very little, but we really hope that we can implement this figure. We also implemented a system that can guarantee the origin of hydrogen, and we're currently working on the tariff decree that should provide for a contribution on operational expenditure, on OPEX. And that is because everybody's talking about the CAPEX and investments, But we produce the hydrogen valleys, but if nobody buys the hydrogen valley, and if nobody buys the hydrogen, well, that hydrogen is useless. So as often happens in many European countries, we need to create a system that can reward the operational expenditure. So these are the files we're working on. There's another one that has an international dimension. About 4 or 5 hydrogen corridors were identified in Europe. This is the South Corridor that goes from North Africa to Germany, passing through Italy and Austria. This has been included in the list of the projects of common interest, the PCIs. There's an agreement between the 3 countries concerned at the moment. So this is there is a feasibility study currently being devised. And we've actually involved our best resources, including SNAM, involving SNAM. So we are quite confident that this can provide a contribution in 10 to 15 years. The expected capacity is 4 million tons every year, which is about 40% of the Repower EU is demanded from Europe. So this will definitely provide a major contribution to Europe's energy safety and security. This is the data indicated in the PNIEC concerning hydrogen quantities in 2030. We were told that we were very cautious. The fact is that we wanted to stick to the minimum demanded by the European legislation. Clearly, everything I've mentioned before is telling us that we need to be cautious when it comes to hydrogen. This piece of data is about 3 gigawatts of capacity of electrolyzers and a share of about 70% produced at a national level, especially in the field of transport and in industry, in the field of industry. Having said this, I've come to an end. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Are there...
Facciamo qualche domanda a Marcello Capra.
I suggest we pose some questions to Marcello Capra. I have a question on some data you gave us. Some data is really challenging data, like the number of electric cars. Other data is more conservative, so to say. Do you think that objectives are currently being revised, or maybe that some fields are in a way rebalanced, fields for which other more far-reaching goals were set in the past? Second question, in the hydrogen valleys, regions are playing as protagonists. So we've seen that there are some utilities which have more capacities than others to do development and to innovate, also in terms of the services that they provide. So this fact that Europe can be seen directly from the actions taken at a local level. Can you give us some input on this? And talking about hydrogen and talking about what we can do with this hydrogen, can you tell us if the country has made strategic decisions in this? Well, you've asked many different things. To answer your first questions, there is a legislative constraint for some objectives. So the target on renewable sources of energy, for example, on emission gap, I mean, that is another target that we need to observe. As regards the number of electric cars, well, no, that's not a legislative constraint. That depends on the countries. That corresponds to a proposal made by our country. Well, my question is whether we can use gas or hydrogen better, gradually reaching sustainability in the field of transportation and mobility, and also with reference to the fact that we can now integrate technologies and that we can integrate energy systems, and this will provide us with new data that we can then use to make decisions that we have not made before because we didn't have the data. Well, just consider that the 2030 plan will be implemented in 5 to 6 years. So it's a very short span time in the field of technology. So I expect some data to be reviewed. For example, when it comes to smart grids, the call for tender was not big enough. I mean, we received many more tenders. So the approach is technologically neutral. We were even accused of being technological neutral. Sometimes people say that plants have to make choices. We entered the nuclear sector, but that will never contribute to the objectives up to 2030 or up to 2040. So this is a plan that has binding targets and others which are less binding. When it comes to hydrogen, I mean, we had to commit the money of the NRRP, but you cannot make the market only through legislation or calls for tenders. The challenge lies there. We need to reduce the costs for the production of hydrogen, and the gas community is fundamental here. Then what's the role of regions here? Unfortunately, so far, I regret having to say that, so far regions have only played an administrative role, an accounting role. So far, regions have not carried out an actual industrial policy. They have not checked, for example, the amount of energy needed, for example, in the Marche region to then identify the number of needed hydrogen valleys. We just received projects, and the idea is to build a strategy from the projects, a bottom-up strategy. Thank you very much. I don't know if there are other questions. Professor? I have a very short question concerning e-cars. We expect a development of electric cars, even if the market is slowing down at the moment. When it comes to hydrogen-fueled cars, you've talked about a plan. I'd like to point out that in the market, they are already there, Toyota Mirai or Hyundai. So aren't we foreseeing anything that goes in this direction? Because on the other hand, we have the electric sector, but then, so hydrogen cars, they have a fuel cell. No, unfortunately, I believe that this is an error, a very serious mistake in terms of perspectives. At the moment, even if we had a hydrogen fuel car, we would have to go to Bozen, to South Tyrol to fuel this car. Recently, I've heard of news by Toyota, talking about Toyota developing new models, but that very much relies on the availability of supplies. In Bozen, hydrogen costs 13 euros per kilo, and with a kilo, a Mirai covers 100 kilometers. But actually, we definitely need a sustainable, advanced transportation, for example, trains when it comes to Sardinia, and hydrogen can be a solution, but not in the short run. Thank you very much, and a big applause. Cristiano Fiameni. So, the next contribution is by Cristiano Fiameni.
So, sustainability in the gas sector. The Italian Gas Committee worked very hard to define rules concerning methane emissions. So let's see how things are going. So, Cristiano, the floor is yours. This is a topic that, even though it's a very specific one, opens views on many different areas. So, please. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for, I'd like to thank Automa for their kind invitation. I've been here on several occasions. And this topic is becoming a constant topic. But I don't think we'll get bored with it because in the next few years we will have to work even more, I believe. Now, very briefly, As you know, I'm part of the Italian Gas Committee. We celebrated our 70th anniversary recently. We deal with innovation within the European Union. Each country has national standardization bodies. In Italy, the UNI has delegated some activities to external bodies with specific agreements. Here you see the bodies I refer to, each one for its sector. The 𝐒𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐭 deals with fuel gas. Our association, and therefore we need to give contribution to our members. We have institutional members like the ministries and the UNI, and then we have members from all parts of the sector. So from gas entry till the combustion systems in households and fumes management. We mainly do standardization activity. We support authorities through an agreement protocol. We support the ministry when it comes to some specific topics like hydrogen and others that we've been working on. We cooperate for the update on regulations on hydrogen with research projects to update laws, and we support the National Fire Brigade. We train, we do training activities, organize events, between 100 and 150 training days for the gas sector specifically. And then we do promotional activities, dissemination activities, and we publish documents and guidelines to help implementing regulations and rules. As regards methane emissions, we have some new situations following what we talked about last year. Some of the things we talked last year have been now implemented. As for the EU regulation, as you know, the regulation has been the object of discussion for quite a while. In the first part of last year, things were sped up. So in the springtime, the Parliament approved, then the Council approved, and then it was published on the the EU journal on the 15th of July. Here you see the number 1787. It came into force 20 days later, so on the 4th of August. So the regulation is now in full force. We should bear in mind that the regulation is the highest level of regulation of legislation that can be obtained. So it has a great impact. It doesn't need to be accepted nationally. It is already valid, so you need to adapt to it. First of all, the scope. The scope is very wide, deals with also coal and inactive wells. And as for the gas sector, it involves the whole sector, from transport and distribution, excluding measuring systems, and then storage and liquefied natural gas. So the whole sector is involved. So it has a great impact. And also in this case, there is food for thought. Such an important regulation refers to industrial systems that are very different one from the other. The storage and regasification system is very different from a city distribution system. So there will be some problems in terms of implementation. It is difficult to have a single rule to apply to all of this. Now, let's have a look at what I was talking about. So it involves the whole sector. As for the distribution sector, It applies to pipelines, road-connected pipelines, like the ones in yellow. These ones are excluded. Metering units are excluded at the end customers. As for users' connections, from a legal point of view, it's okay, but from an application point of view, it's problematic because connections start from there is an underground part and an overground part till the metering unit. And it applies to connections, but it excludes the ones on private ground. So public ground is involved, is included, but private ones is not. So legally it's okay, but when you need to detect leakage, they have to act for safety reasons, but the reporting activities and the repairing activities and quantification activities, according to the regulations, do not apply. So that's a problem. And this is just the scope. So obviously, I will just give you some points because this regulation is a very complex one. So I have about 10 minutes. I will try and emphasize the most important points. As for the structure of the document, it is more or less similar to the draft that we saw before. Now, I would like to mention a few articles that may be important. So, first of all, as for the scope, we talked about it. As for costs borne by the operators, here it says they are efficient kind of costs, but efficiency depends also on the number of activities that you perform. And then appointment of the competent authorities, they can have a very important impact. And then we will talk about deadlines and implications. Here we have a part that is more an administrative part that we will skip for the time being. And then we talk about the operational part, methane emissions, so what to do, when to do it, what deadlines you have, what kind of reporting activities is required, and so on. As for Article 15, Article 15 refers to restrictions for the release and combustion, like venting and flaring. Article 15 remains unchanged. It's forbidden, except for emergency reasons or safety reasons, or in some cases when it's impossible to do it. But here it says that economic conditions are not considered as a limitation. And this could be a correct thing in an industrial setting, but in a city setting, this is a very complicated issue because to re-inject gas into a pipeline is not like taking gas from a pipeline of a transport grid. So I think there will be some safety concerns here. And so we will probably have to do some flaring in case it's necessary, rather than releasing in the atmosphere for some routine activities. Let's now have a look at some articles. Competent authorities. The first deadline is this one. 6 months since it came into force, you need to appoint a competent authorities. Each member state needs to appoint competent authorities, even more than one. This is important because this authority will receive all the reporting data and then assess. The authority can intervene in some detection and survey programs, and they can issue some sanctions. And in terms of management, within 1 year, the managers have to present to the competent authorities a report with the quantification of emissions. So, first of all, there's 1 year of time to do this. And this is a complex issue. Furthermore, things get more complicated because in the same article it says that as you do this kind of activity, you do it complying with technical standards and rules, but they are being developed right now. And then, according to Article 32, that is the committee rules. But then it talks about the more advanced techniques being used. And then it says that also 𝐒𝐸𝐴MP can be used. And this is an important point. The 𝐒𝐸𝐴MP is an international partnership, an organization that deals with voluntary practices for emission reductions. But there are no technical rules. If I use the 𝐒𝐸𝐴MP, I can use only what was applied before the regulation came into force. So all the evolution of the 𝐒𝐸𝐴MP, you can only use what was done before the 4th of August. So you need to use something old. So this is already a source of concern. It doesn't help simplifying things. And then let's have a look at Article 32, because the Commission requires to the European standardization body to work to have standardized rules to be used for everything that we mentioned before. So measuring quantification of emissions, the LDAR surveys, leak detection, all equipment, quantification of emissions, measurement and quantification of emissions. And once the CERN has concluded its process, then the Commission assesses it and then publishes them on the journal. But the Commission can adopt delegate acts if it's not satisfied with the activity being done. So once again, we have a first request to the CERN. They are debating about it, but the deadlines are spring 2027 to have final rules, because that is the important part. What is required by the regulation, which is understandable, applies to an industrial sector that is not ready. Some areas are more advanced than others. So many technical specifications, many industrial practices were not available. And so it will take time from a technical point of view to update everything. And then we have Article 14. Article 14 is not easy to comment on. The point is that by May, so we have 9 months, what will managers have to do? They have to present to competent authorities their program. And this creates confusion because the authority needs to be appointed by February. By May, the managers have to prepare the program, but by August, they have to do the first audit. So you see, things are very close together. And managers have to start the first audit as soon as possible, but we don't have the specific rules. And then they do the first audit by the 5th of August. So 1 year, within 1 year from the coming into force of the regulations. And then, after you look for leakages, for leaks, and there are articles and attachments that specify the kind of survey, but I won't go into detail right now. There's always the problem of the practical implementation of things. But then what should we do then? After the managers carry out the leak detection activities, should they repair or replace all components with something of a higher level? Well, it's possible that in some levels, we're talking about 500,000 ppl, which is a very low value. Because when we look for leaks for safety reasons, to be very far from flammability limits, we consider 1%, so 10,000 ppl, not 500,000. So you see, things are complicated. And then we need to repair or replace. And repairs has to be done right away. But this requirement is complicated. It can applied to a refinery, for example. But if I apply this to the Rome network grid, if I find a leak in Rome, I try to repair it right away. But how can I do it? And then it says, if it cannot be done, a new attempt will be done as soon as possible within 5 days, and it is completed, the repairing, by 30 days. If I cannot complete this repairing, I need to prepare a report and notify the authority, saying that I cannot do it and I will do it within 30 days. And if I cannot do it by 30 days, because I cannot close roads, etc., I have to issue a report explaining why I'm late. So you see that there is an administrative burden which is huge and is not proportional to what is required. This is the crux of the matter. Let's now see how we can manage all of this. The regulation leaves a little bit of space, saying that if I can demonstrate that some leaks are so limited and so difficult to repair that the continuous activity, monitoring activities, could cause higher damages than compared to the advantage of the repairing. So there is a slight possibility, but we will have to see in the next few months how we can use it practically. So this is the situation. It's a very complicated situation. Now, to conclude, as for the activity that we are carrying out to support and fill some of these gaps, we have the pre-normative 𝐒𝐽𝐽 gas activity. So there are several documents, pre-normative documents that can be downloaded from the 𝐒𝐽𝐽 gas activities. We're talking about best available techniques for certain activities. The Zero BAT was published in 2024. There is a guideline to obtain indication about how to implement the regulation in this first year. There are more questions than answers, actually, right now. So we're trying to give some general indications. Of course, this will be the first of many other documents. So from a regulation point of view, we are concluding an activity that we started years ago on the quantification of emissions. And we've started working, following a request by the Commission, on 3 projects. Gas infrastructure, quantification and reporting, that is Article 12. Leak detection and repair, how to do leak detection and repair programs, Article 14. And then gas infrastructure, the part on venting and flaring, that is Article 15. So the technical support part is being analyzed with specific programs. But of course, it takes time. Projects on such complex issues have 2 main problems. One, an objective problem. Not everything is available right now. And then a very operational one. At the European level, we have very different situations. As we heard before, in Italy, sometimes we can give indications of a certain kind because we have experience and knowledge. And also our leak detection activities is done in a certain way. But things are done differently in other countries. So finding an agreement on a set of rules when there are practices that nationally are so different, it's very complicated. And it's very complicated and very difficult to find a common agreement, common ground. There are many Italian experts taking part in this kind of programs. We are trying to give our own contribution to the evolution of the situation. As I said, the situation is constantly changing, also on the short term. That is all from me. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. If there are questions, we can ask them now. I have a question of my own. It's not a technical question. When there are asymmetries, clear asymmetries between the rules and the level of the industrial sector, so can there be some incentive programs to help the industry speed up, catch up? Or is there a standstill? Are we left in a limbo? So what's the situation? Well, in this case, the situation is very dynamic because there are European research projects that have been financed to try and solve some situations of this kind. And this is a very important initiative. You use European funds on research projects for this. I didn't talk about this, but this is a progressive step process. All this activity will become more and more challenging. And after a certain amount of years, the request will be not just for leak detection and repairs, but also reconciliation. That is, in an ideal situation, I would have to detect leaks and do measurements, and then find that in the atmosphere, what I find in terms of emission in the atmosphere is in line with what I've detected in terms of leakage. This is, of course, is very complicated. But there is a research project to try and understand what are the best technologies. But we cannot have a project on technologies that do not exist to see which ones are the best. When I have a regulation that is not giving me the rules to adopt. So we will need to do the best we can with what we have today. As for hydrogen, is there a set of rules? Well, this regulation refers to natural gas because it refers to the greenhouse effect. There are several studies, although they do not converge on the same points, that are assessing the impact of hydrogen on the greenhouse effect. These are preliminary studies, though. So once they progress, things will be updated. As for the mix, nowadays we are studying on the safety of the mix. Yes, I wanted to ask about the activity that 𝐒𝐦𝐽 is carrying out when it comes to hydrogen. Well, the situation is very complex. We have our standardization and normative activities for the whole sector. Each committee is working to introduce hydrogen in the mix for the different products. And some standards have already been published. Right now, we are cooperating with the National Fire Brigade that among its aims has the one to simplify the administrative part, but we need to update the decree laws on gas to allow higher percentage of hydrogen. So we are cooperating with them, and we've done some studies, national studies, to understand how ready is the sector for these changes. So now we need to share these ideas to see how we can make technical proposal in terms of how to modify the decree laws, and then meet again with the fire brigade to see where we can agree on things and how to go ahead. So from the beginning of next year, we think we will have new proposals. One last question when it comes to the differences between our territories, our grids, and all the actions that our utilities carry out. These different levels from one area to another, what kind of impact does it have? Is there standardization or being so different, one area from another in our country? What's the situation? Well, I don't think there are differences because technical issues are very common. What I mean is that they're shared. Grids are present everywhere, but there may be differences when it comes to the managerial and administrative part, because maybe due to the size of the company, the impact is different. If you are a small or medium-sized company, the impact of this kind of regulation is far bigger than it is for a larger company. Thank you, Cristiano. An applause for Cristiano. Now